Jess Boss is a certified financial planner with a degree in psychology and a passion for fitness and coaching. Her career has centered around providing clients with an experience that makes them feel seen, heard, and valued, and excited about taking the next step. Throughout her presentation, you'll see her thoughtfulness, her foresight, and her concern for the client, and you'll also get some great resources and techniques for developing more trust and loyalty with your own clients, especially as the financial advising industry evolves as we enter the great wealth transfer. Jess, welcome to the Client Connection Summit. Thank you for being one of our speakers.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me, Nate. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm thrilled to have you here, and I am really excited about the topic that you're talking about today. So you've prepared a presentation on preparing for the great wealth transfer. I've heard a lot lately about this great wealth transfer. I'm sure everybody who's watching knows generally what you're talking about. It's the biggest wealth transfer in human history. But why is this topic important to talk about today?
I expect it to be something important to talk about for the next 20 years, right? And I think the differentiator for now is that we are at the precipice of this big transition, right? We've got the baby boomer generation that has been accumulating the majority of these assets through either pension plans, 401ks, just hard work and savings over the years in preparation and probably some defense of what they experienced as kids going through the Great Depression. And I feel like right now is going to be the start of it, but it's also the moment that if we aren't preparing for it, then we're going to find ourselves behind the 8 ball on being able to be a part of it going forward.
The people who go into this wealth transfer prepared are going to be the ones who reap the biggest benefits, and everybody else is going to be left behind.
Yeah, I think so. So I'm concerned about that for me and my fellow advisors, the ones that I knew that are doing great work, that have been spending years and years and years building amazing practices where they truly serve their clients, and coming up to this edge of now, how do we continue that on into the next generation? For those of us who are getting a little older and it's harder to pivot, that brain plasticity just isn't quite there, that neuroplasticity isn't there, but we still have to be willing to take a hard look at this and see what we can do and what matters for our businesses in order to stay in the game and continue to provide great service. So
I think the reality is, if you're going to be in business over the next 5 to 20 years, your business is going to be hugely impacted by this topic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good thing to pay attention to right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. So today, I hope we can get through a couple of different pieces, but really the take home I want for everybody is just, we want to educate you and want to equip you with some strategies and some things to think about for your own practice. We're gonna obviously throw some data at you to make sure it's relevant and meaningful. There's a lot of data to show that this is the future. This is going to have an impact. So we're going to bring that, some pieces of that, but we want to send you home with some things to think about, and hopefully enough to capture and implement in your own practices. So Cerulli is a pretty well-known company that runs data reports, and this is a headline from one of those reports talking about there's $84 trillion at stake in the next 24 years. So either through transition from baby boomers to their spouses as they pass away. So the heirs may be just their spouses that are left behind. It could be their children, that Gen X. It could be the millennials, those grandchildren, or even down to Gen Z. So depending on how they've set up their estate plans, we've got a lot of money transitioning through 2044. And this is kind of how it's shaking out. So as you can see, there's going to be quite a bit happening in Gen X and millennials over the next 20 years, and a lot of problem solving to do with them.
If there's anything I know about having lived with baby boomers my whole life, it's that we don't necessarily look at the world the same way. So we're going to have to adapt a little bit the way that we do business with this next generation too. And I'm sure we'll get into that.
Yeah, I mean, some of it is going to be probably, to your point, it's going to feel like a little bit of a tug of war with
Mhm.
those assets. And maybe a lot of clients that don't see eye to eye with that next generation. My dad, I told a story about him the other day. He tends to look at our generation as
Mhm.
soft. So his comment about CrossFit was, that's for people who don't do real work.
Yeah.
He just has this mindset of there's what I've worked to earn and accumulate and save has been harder for me than this next generation because it seems like the wealth is so plentiful
Yeah.
now. So some of the perspectives on what we've had and what's been it's that those perspectives it's just easier for us. And so there's a little bit of a stronghold maybe on those assets because they're not really sure if they can be trusted to the next generation. So there's a lot of work, not just physical work, not just financial work to do, but a lot of emotional work to do to help
Mhm.
bridge the gap between those assets that are currently with those older generations and then how it transfers to the next generation. So there's a lot to be done.
Definitely.
This graph is really just a look at where the wealth is located for all of these generations. And one of the things that I took away from this was just seeing relatively how little experience our like millennial, and that would be me as well,
Mhm.
millennial age group has had with managing these different types of assets, and probably why some of the trepidation is valid, right? For some
Yeah.
of these older generations, they truly, genuinely believe we don't know how to manage their assets, and maybe we don't. Um,
Yeah,
and
there's that dual worry of one, are they ready? Are they going to squander it? And then on
mhm,
the other hand, there's if I give this to them, will it ruin them?
yeah,
Like if they have the option to do anything with their life, will they choose to do nothing? And
yeah,
I think a lot of baby boomers and are probably nervous to pass on their wealth for fear of turning their children into some form of a trust fund baby where
hmm,
yeah, they become entitled and they don't want
yeah.
that.
Yeah. And we'll talk more about this. Like the headlines don't help because the headlines like to find those cases. The headlines
Right.
like to highlight that noise. But again, we'll get to this later as well. Like this is where advisors can really make that difference, and provide the opportunity for these conversations to be had in a safe space. And I know there's a lot of work being done now with like financial therapists coming in and providing some safety for couples to be able to talk through some of their financial issues. I think there's a lot of room still left for there to be some safe space made for this conversation around transfer of assets and conversation around transfer of wealth and estate planning. And so this really tees it up well to understand though that some of the concern that these baby boomers have is warranted, is well founded in the sense that they have a lot that the younger generations don't have, and they've managed assets the younger generations haven't managed. We'll talk about in a minute. The younger generations have a different mindset on what will provide wealth and profit for them. Can that be trusted? Can I give them my money and will they invest it in the right way? Because they have an investment mindset, but future generations have a little bit of a different mindset.
Yeah.
This again, just kind of a little bit more on the same page of not only are the older generations a little concerned about their money being transferred, but it is those younger generations that are concerned too. And I know Nate, you had a little bit of a story that we were talking about before we hit record about this that really brought this to light.
Yeah, I just barely started having inheritance conversations with my dad. He retired this year, and within like a month of getting retired, he also was diagnosed with cancer. And so it's really in our family brought to the forefront this conversation of like legacy and like,
Mm,
Dad, you started your own business. He's an engineer. He started an engineering firm like 25 years ago, and it grew, and he's done really well. And there's this conversation of like, hey, maybe the first time in our family history, you're like the first generation that has something significant to pass on to your heirs, to your children, that could be life-changing in some ways. I don't know the numbers.
Yeah.
But that's part of the point is
That's part of the point.
I don't know much about it. And he started to ask me questions about, well, what do you know, if you were to get an inheritance, would you want it like experiences? Would you want gifts? Would you want us to start like a family foundation and have like service opportunities? And he's presenting me with all these, well, we're having conversations. I'm presenting them with some ideas as well. But I think it's just clicked for my parents that like we haven't had these conversations as a family, and that it might be beneficial for them to get a good idea of what their values are, what their hopes and dreams are, and see how they align with the rest of the kids and what the kids' needs are. And these conversations, if they don't happen, what often happens, I think, is that the idea of having this conversation comes up when it's too late.
Yeah.
You know, somebody passes away and then it's like, oh, we probably should have talked about this 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And I think the only reason we're having it right now is because of my dad's health scare. So there's probably a lot of clients, especially if you have clients that are baby boomers, who need to be having these conversations with their heirs, with their children, so that they can prepare them. Part of that, are they prepared, lies on that responsibility lies on them to prepare their kids for the wealth. But they don't know how to have that conversation. They don't know how to broach it. They don't know they don't know how to bring it up or what to say. And they're relying on you as an advisor to hopefully guide them through that and advise them. That's part of the financial advice is part of it, but really like what causes us the most angst in life. And Andrew mentions this in his session on the summit, but assets and money provide a certain amount of like reassurance and stability and peace of mind. But really where peace of mind gets really disrupted is if your relationships aren't in the right place. And so if there's a relational aspect to the money that's in question, I don't know if my kids are ready. Well, we should be having that conversation now before it's too late. So.
Well, first, I know I said it before, I'll say it again. I'm sorry, your dad's news. And it does bring up the gravity of this type of conversation being had whenever emotions are even further heightened, right? Whenever the meaning of it and maybe the urgency of it is causing some pressure on the conversation as well. And you mentioned something else, like it being the catalyst is potentially less helpful than the advisor being the catalyst for this type of conversation where everyone comes into the room at peace and excited to have this conversation.
Stress and anxiety surrounding it. And I'll tell you, these conversations that I've had with my dad in his last couple of months have been some of the best conversations I've had with him.
Yeah.
Because I've been able to get curious about his legacy and how he and my mom want to be remembered and the impact they want to have on the world and what kind of, what are the things, not just the financial capital, but the human capital that they want to pass on to me and my kids and their kids. And, and it's been so fun to have those conversations, and what a gift. Like I think about my parents' financial advisor and what a gift he could have given us by initiating those conversations before the cancer. These conversations could have been attributed to him instead of to the cancer, but now it's going to the cancer. So don't let that be you.
Yeah.
Be the person who initiates these beautiful conversations for these families.
Yeah. Completely separate concern, but also related to my parents. They started a 501c3 14 years ago. So 2 years after my first child was born. And so they've been kind of raising a 501c3 at the same time that I've been raising a baby. And they visited a little village in Uganda that my sister was living in for a year. And while they visited, they fell in love with the little village, and the village needed water. And so they came back just with this mission in mind to raise enough money to be able to send over the money to build a well there because they needed clean water. Well, that one well has turned into building a wall around the community, building a school, building a couple of homes to foster kids there. They have over 200 kids sponsored from families in the US and all over that come to the school and get education. They get uniforms, they get to play soccer, and they get fed, and, all of these amazing things that they've done. Just like I said, I've been raising kids, they've been raising a 501c3. But I remember the last time, I guess it was Christmas. I remember standing in the kitchen with my dad and telling my dad, like, I need to know what your plan is for this. Like, y'all are not getting younger. I don't expect you to go anytime soon. But if something were to happen to you and mom tomorrow, like, this is a huge endeavor now. This is a huge living, breathing, wonderful thing. He goes over there 3 times a year. I can't do that. So I need to know, like, they have a board, they have a lot of like different pieces, but they are the ones that are running this at the top and serving from the bottom and running it from the top. And I'm like, and this is, kind of back to the whole, like, I don't know what the heck to do with this. If this were to be handed to me tomorrow, to be able to continue to honor their legacy. And I think there's a lot of people in this, like in this age group of 25 to 45 or 25 to 55 that are still in the middle of their lives, still raising families, still running businesses or, running their careers. And if their parents were to drop off the face of the earth tomorrow, they just don't know what to do. They don't feel confident. And it's not that they don't feel confident in like investing money.
Right.
Or having money like this.
If you gave me a big
windfall.
chunk of money, I would find ways to invest it and spend it.
I would figure out what to do with money. But
Right.
It's all of it. It's the gambit of the financial resources that our parents have accumulated that are part of legacy, that are part of meaning, that are part of family, that we just wouldn't know what to do with. And so I think there's a real opportunity for advisors to say, hey, I'm helping your parents, and I will help this transition for you. And I'm here for everyone here. I'm not just your parents' financial advisor. I'm not just their investment manager.
Well, I love the direction this conversation is going, because you won't find anybody more passionate than me about facilitating conversations about what people value, what they believe, what their goals are, what their mission is. If those types of conversations are interesting to you, this is a dream profession to be in right now, because
I
you should
agree.
be having this conversation on a regular basis with families.
I agree. And so the part of the thing I think that we see as these younger generations are coming up and looking around, seeing their older parents or grandparents being taken advantage of. There's a lot of noise and conversation around insurance products that have affected and influenced the wealth of baby boomers negatively in a lot of cases. And it's causing a lot of suspicion, causing a lot of trust issues. Can we trust a financial advisor to help us, or are a financial advisor just out for their own interests? Are they just out to try to make money off of us? Do they just want to be a part of this conversation now that I have money, as opposed to not being willing to help me before? And so I think there's valid reasons for them to have trust issues. I think it's crazy that as you kind of step down into the generations, the trust issues double.
I'll just tell you from personal experience and from talking to advisors, the worst time to introduce yourself to your clients' kids is right after a tragedy. If your clients pass away or they, get cancer or something like that, and it's like, oh, by the way, I'm your parents' financial advisor. I really love to have a conversation with you. It really does feel predatory, as opposed to like, hey, we've been having these conversations about legacy. We think you should be involved in them. Let's have a chat. Like, that's a way different introduction.
Absolutely. Definitely a way to build that trust back with them. And we'll talk about again later on some ways to get into those conversations with that younger generation. As you're starting to think about those younger generations, just keep in mind, like, and I think there's a great study out. I don't have it on these slides, but you can go find it. Michael Kitces does a great study and shows the amount of financial decisions and financial milestones that people encounter between ages of 25 and 50, 55, somewhere in there. And they're completely different than the kinds of decisions and milestones, and way more than you meet and that you encounter from retirement on. And so just being aware that the advice and planning needs of these younger generations are going to be different, and making sure that you are not only positioning some conversations around that, but also inviting those conversations and being ready for those conversations and educating yourself on how to manage these kinds of financial decisions and milestones. And if this is not your area of expertise as an advisor, then understanding that as these assets transfer down to those next generations, that you are going to lose probably a percentage of those. And you should, if you're not able to competently handle these conversations and give advice in these areas. But some of these, these things right here just highlight some of the important decisions that they feel like they're really centering money around in their lives. And then just a little bit more kind of in that direction, like the conversation that I feel like I came into as an advisor, and Nate, I'd love to hear how your experience with this. I always thought growing up that you found an advisor when you had money you need to invest, right?
Yeah.
I didn't think that an advisor was there for all of these financial decisions. I learned a lot. I realized that a planner and a financial planner has a much different role in the aspect of a client's life than say simple, but an only investment manager would. And I think it's also something that the younger generations are realizing as well, that, if you are positioning yourself as someone who does well with managing assets only, and that's your kind of primary service offering, then you're probably going to lose the interest as we go along in this conversation and as we go along in this next 20 years of wealth transfer. What have you seen? What are you thinking?
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. I think we all know that now more than ever the industry is just commoditized.
Mm.
Information
Yep.
is so easy to get your hands on. Apps, algorithms, AI, like freaking Chat GPT. You can just type in, this is what assets I have, and this is the age I am, and when I want to retire, and it'll spit out some pretty decent advice for you. The quantitative side of things is going to be replaced very soon.
Yeah.
And really the art of advising is what's going to make an advisor really valuable. And I think a lot of people make the assumption that until my portfolio or my assets are complex or big enough, it doesn't make sense for me to go talk to an artist,
Yeah.
somebody who does this full time. So
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what they're looking for, what the research says they're looking for is advisors, especially on the investment side, at least. They're looking for advisors who are competent in the conversation around private equity, business ownership, and how do we diversify our assets beyond the traditional stocks and bonds. So again, just something that to be aware of if you are not educated in this area as an advisor. The younger generations are going to be asking more about it than you probably have encountered so far with the older generation. So as they come up, this whole conversation is about preparing. So if this is an area that you feel like you might be lacking in, this is an area to write down on your list of things to get prepared for and to start finding ways to educate yourself in and to be curious about so that you can stay relevant with the conversations that you might be having with your clients moving forward. And then the other thing that they're talking about, which I know there's a lot of differing opinions on sustainable investing, but I think the important thing to draw from this is that when they have the conversation with you, when they say, I want to invest in sustainable assets, they're not saying, should I? They're saying, I want to. And they're expecting you to meet them with advice that helps them identify opportunities and mitigate the risks in the areas that they are interested in. And so leaning in and being curious about why they're saying that is important instead of just scratching it off the table. With previous generations, you might could have done that. You might could have said, here's the data. You're not going to get as great returns. All we're doing here, we're investing so that we can get you this, blah, blah, blah. You could probably talk them out of it through data. Moving forward, you're going to have a lot more, noise that they're receiving from all the headlines, but two, just convictions that they're coming to the table with and reasons why it's important for them to align their finances with the things that matter to them. So if you're not coming back to the table and across the table and sitting with them at the table and asking, okay, why does that matter to you? And then giving them advice on how to mitigate those risks and find the opportunities and the things that matter to them, you're probably also going to be left out of that conversation with that client around those assets. And if that's what you're good with that, great. Again, this is a conversation about preparing for the opportunities, and just knowing maybe what's a sideline for you. If this is a sideline, more power to you. I'm all about finding your lane and staying in it. But I do think that based on the data, it shows here, you are going to encounter a lot more of those conversations, a lot more convictions around how to align dollars with meaning.
Yeah, I was just talking to a friend of mine this like 2 weeks ago. And they just sold a business for 7 figures. They're doing really great. And he says that he has his financial advisor on speed dial because when he gets anxiety about his finances or about the market, he likes to call his advisor, and his advisor is kind of like his financial therapist. He kind of like talks him off the cliff of doing something dramatic and drastic. And I saw a study recently that showed that, older generations want more of like they want somebody to provide advice and recommendations and take more of like a sales role of like this product or this strategy is what's going to work better for you. But these younger generations are looking for more of a coach.
Yeah.
They want to be more involved in their financial decisions, and they want somebody who's going to counsel with them and allow them to be involved in their planning and help them align that plan with their values. So this rings true.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So we'll move now into a little bit more of the strategic planning piece. We'll talk a little bit about like kind of how to build the foundation. And our goal here is like, we want to give you a compelling reason to think about it now before the problem occurs, before the opportunity occurs. So there's problems and opportunities embedded in all of this. We just want you to be thinking about it and preparing for it now in the ways that you can. So this is a diagram of a plane. You may have heard the story before. Back in World War II, they were having issues with the planes that were coming back being shot to pieces, really. And you can see this is a diagram of the bullet holes or the holes in the plane from being in combat on the field. And so the issue that was presented to them was, how do we protect these planes better? These planes are coming back to us all shot up. How do we make sure that we build these planes up better so that there's not as many holes in them? And so what happened inside this conversation is they brought in a researcher, and he took one look at the diagrams of the plane. And he said, your issues are not where the bullet holes are. And this is where everybody thought the problems were. This is where they wanted to really build up the planes and make them stronger. He said the issues probably where the holes are not. Because what's happening is the planes that are getting hit in these areas are the planes that are not coming back. So survivorship bias is this idea of, we think that the problems are the things that we see right in front of our face, the bullet holes that we see right in front of our face. But really, sometimes the biggest problems that are happening for us are the ones that we don't see yet. So kind of back to this, like just driving home this point, like maybe in your practice, the issues and the things that you need to be concerned about are not the things building up the current things that you're doing really well, or fixing some of the things that are a little bit broken that are a part of your process right now. But maybe there's some pieces of your process that you haven't even considered. And so kind of what we want to do is just continue to bring in to you today these ideas, these concepts, some new information, some ideas of what you haven't looked at yet. And then the other thing we want to do is make sure that we are focusing in on the important things that are urgent, which is what we feel like are those areas that you haven't addressed yet, or that maybe aren't a part of your process yet. And we'll talk about maybe why they aren't. And then also pay attention to those important but non-urgent things, those holes that are already there. We think there's reason definitely to have this two-pronged approach of looking at both. But Nate, why don't you give us a little bit of an intro on the next piece, which is going to help build the case for why maybe we're not getting to the important, not urgent pieces.
Yeah. So Dwight D. Eisenhower, the former president of the United States, when he became president, one of the realizations he had was there were a lot of demands on his time and attention. And if he wanted to sleep and if he wanted to have family time and like live even a remotely balanced life, he couldn't do everything. And so I don't know if he developed the matrix or if he just popularized it. I'm assuming he popularized it, but he took this matrix idea and he ran every decision that he had to do, every task that came across his plate through this matrix. And it allowed him to be successful as a president, and kind of maintain his sanity and not completely burn himself out. There's 4 quadrants on this matrix. There's the important and urgent. There's the important and not urgent. Then down in the lower left, there you have the stuff that's urgent but not important. And then in the lower right, you have the stuff that's not important and not urgent. And the not important, not urgent stuff was never really a big deal for the president of the United States because it never really came across his table.
Yeah.
It was never, if something wasn't urgent, he didn't typically see it. And then he noticed that there were a lot of important and urgent things that popped up on his desk a lot. These things are very time sensitive. We need to take care of them now, and they're very important. And what he tried to do was minimize the level of urgency around the most important things. And he found that as he planned a little bit better and got his team to think a little bit more in advance, the important things, there were less and less urgent and important things coming across his desk. And then the real battle began because he wanted to spend the majority of his time working on things that were not urgent, but very important.
Mm-hmm.
Things like, you got to invest in your marriage. Things like spending time with your kids and not missing them when they grow up. Things like, things that wouldn't necessarily be super urgent, but man, they're super important to him, those relationships and those tasks. And oftentimes those got pushed aside for things that were not important, but were urgent. And I think that's the trap that most people run into in their lives, is they address a lot of urgent things, but those urgent things aren't always important. It kind of goes back to this airplane thing that we were talking about just a second ago, where the bullet holes in the plane might seem like an urgent problem, but they're just not that important. Like a plane can still fly with holes in the wings, but not a hole in the engine. And so you need to organize your life so you can address the important things first. So I really love that. I really love that story of Dwight D. Eisenhower, and he was able to manage his life as the president of the United States using that. And if the most stressed out and most important and powerful man in the world can use this matrix to kind of find balance in his life, then we can take the same principle not only to our own businesses, but also to our clients and help them make the decisions that hopefully revolve around the things that are most important.
Yeah, absolutely. That, that top quadrant really is where you want to center the majority of your tasks as the financial advisor with your clients. And so we're going to go very quickly through a couple of different scenarios just to kind of look at this as a way to strategize with your clients, because keep in mind too that your clients are coming in with an idea of what's important and urgent to them as well. And so you've got to kind of lay that over on top of what as the advisor is important and urgent to you and find some middle ground on that. But it is helpful maybe to position this as the reason that we are, for an example, with a retirement planning for a baby boomer client, maybe the reason why you want to position that long-term estate planning as important and urgent, because you want to make sure they are thinking about the long-term implications of not having that in place with their future generations. And so setting aside some time, making sure you're thoroughly planning for that. So use this Eisenhower matrix just as a way to eliminate non-essential stuff, as a way to delegate things that are not meant for you and your client to sort out, and to focus in on the things that will really make a difference that only you can do for your client, that belong on the table with you and your client. So you can do that for a baby boomer. You can change this conversation up a little bit and do it if you're talking with a high net worth family about wealth transfer. Okay. You can also do that as we're looking at maybe some ideas and options for providing financial literacy and education for the millennial generation. So using this matrix to kind of decide what falls below the line, right? What doesn't make it into that important and urgent category for you and your clients, and helping to make sure that you are centering yourself around some of the issues and providing the foundation for you and your firm and your clients to move forward into the future. So we're going to talk a little bit more directly about some of those practical steps that you can take as an advisor to help with some of these issues with your clients, to prepare you and your clients for that wealth transfer. Um, and the first one is going to be client communication. Nate, anything you want to say here?
Yeah, I mean, I love this screenshot by Brendan Fraser. He's referencing this report done by Y Charts this last year. Part of what he says here is like, let's talk to your clients. I'm sure you can touch on that a little bit. But one of the things that really stood out to me in this report is that not only do clients want to be contacted and hear from their advisor more frequently, but they also don't just want to hear about financial stuff. They don't just want an update on their portfolio's performance. That's not all they want to hear from you. The number one reason that clients either left or considered leaving their advisors in 2023 was because they didn't feel like their advisor deeply understood them or their goals. And so this communication thing has a little bit to do with like, hey, I want to know that you're thinking about me, but there's also a big part of it that's like, hey, I want to know that you care about me as a human and that you care about the things I care about.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, you can see 50%, like almost 50% of the people wish their advisor contacted them either somewhat or much more frequently.
Yeah.
So on the topic of communication, there's a couple of different ways that you can approach that. On the left-hand side, there's a Covenant Wealth Advisors free estate planning seminar. I thought that they had done a really great job of laying out on their website what the service that they provide to their clients and to the community. So anybody can sign up for this. It's a free estate planning seminar that they do online. And what they're doing is just putting education and support in front of the people that see their website, that work with them. And the great thing about this is what they're communicating to their clients is we care about this, right? The clients know they're setting aside dedicated time for their clients to access them and the information that they know about estate planning. And also the other great thing about this, Nate, is that if an advisor has a client that can't make it to that workshop, guess what they're going to do?
They're probably going to say, hey, I can't make it, but I would love to learn more.
That's exactly what they're going to do. That's what I would do.
Yeah.
You know, if I'm going to a gym and somebody's creating a gymnastics seminar and I know that I need to work on my gymnastics and I can't make it that Saturday because my kids have something going on, you know what I'm going to do? I'll be like, dang, I can't make it to that. Is there some time that I could come in and we could work on my pull-ups together?
Are you going to do this again?
Are you going to do this again? That's exactly what I'm going to, that's exactly what we hear. So putting this out there not only signals to your people that you care about this topic, that you're prepared to teach on this topic, that you're prepared to educate on this topic, but it also gives them an opportunity to say to you, I care about it. I want to learn more. I'm interested in this. So that you can know which clients specifically are leaning into this conversation and ask more questions about why. And then the other thing down here, and I guess you pointed out, I love this survey, but I love what Brendan said. Like, if you don't know how often your clients want to be contacted, just ask them. Like, such an easy, approachable answer, solution to this problem. Imagine. Brendan's
but
great
how
for that.
many of us don't? Just have the foresight to do that. So
yeah. So maybe at your next meeting with them, you just say, hey, we were thinking about doing an estate planning seminar. Would you be interested in that? You can survey and see what the opportunity is in and among your own clients just by asking more questions and being really on the forefront of that conversation with them, letting them know that it's okay to reach out to you whenever they're interested in those kinds of conversations. A second thing, kind of as a take home, is just kind of recapping and knowing what all the estate planning services are that you can provide and or at least oversee as a financial advisor. Obviously, if you are not a licensed attorney, you cannot draft wills and trusts for your clients nor create them legally. But it is one of the services as a financial advisor that is helpful to be competent enough in to oversee and to manage as part of their plan. even if you are estate planning light in the services that you provide for your clients. And we'll drop a couple of tech tools that we love later on that can connect you with some services that can draw these up for you, or you can find somebody in the community. And one thing that I've found is that there are lots of great estate planning attorneys that are willing to meet with you and walk through how they draw up these documents and the questions that they ask and the questions that they want you to ask as advisors in order to partner with them well. If you set yourself up as someone who wants to help them do their job better and take time off their plate in order to get to the work that they need to do for a client, I promise you they're going to respond to that in a meaningful way. So approaching someone, that's also a great way to find someone in the community that you trust as well to work with. So if you don't have somebody currently that you are working with, again, we'll drop some links later on for some great virtual services. And then what we can do as advisors is we can always review their beneficiary designations. So for any legal contracts, whether that's IRAs or 401ks or their insurance contracts, going through those with a client and making sure that they've named their beneficiaries correctly according to their wishes and that the percentages designated to each, showing them visually mapping out what this looks like. Most of the financial planning software tools that we use these days will show, like, in the event of an estate transfer, these are your heirs that you've designated. As long as you have all that built into the system, it'll show you who's getting what and how much. And it'll also tag and flag usually the tax impact of that. And so speaking of taxes, tax considerations, this is where you're going to want to have a CPA partner and make sure that as you're building out this estate plan that you are planning for and prepared for, and your client is planning for and prepared for and knowledgeable about the capital gains taxes, income taxes, gift taxes, and estate taxes that are going to impact that transfer. There's a lot in here and not something necessarily that one advisor and one set of eyes should be taking a look at alone. So this is a great opportunity for you to bring in those other sets of eyes through your CPA partners and other tech tools, again, that we'll drop in just a minute, and to look through your financial planning software and to really double, triple, quadruple check that the work that you're doing and then the planning that you're doing on behalf of your client is putting them in the best position possible, building out that trust for them. It's a great place to communicate with them what you're doing for them and the value that you provide. And then the technology and tools, of course, Chronology goes at the top of my recommendation to clients on those conversations. Because again, so much of this is built around how to have the conversation of that estate transfer, how to set up these moments for the older generation to start building trust with that younger generation, that the younger generation can carry out their legacy and wishes with the money that they've saved. And what you guys have built over at Chronology in order to facilitate those conversations is really impressive.
Thanks.
So I absolutely think that's a wonderful tool for advisors who may not be sure how to think about estate planning, not what to think, not the numbers, not the data, not the assets, not the transfer, but how to think about how to set these conversations up and how to show their clients that they truly care and want to be a part of that. And so it's a great tool for improving kind of the EQ score of an advisor around this conversation. Trust and Will and Wealth.com both offer different levels of services around building out those trust documents and will documents. And then Holistic Plan is an incredible tax tool that is integrated in a lot of ways. I know they recently launched an integration with Asset Map, who also does a great job of building a picture around estate planning. So just some really wonderful, wonderful tools out there that can be incorporated into your planning practice in order to, again, prepare for this conversation as we start to move into this wealth transfer.
Jess, I think you have done an incredible job at showing us the importance of really thinking about this wealth transfer. I think it's easy to think about it as a future problem that maybe you won't have to deal with for another 5 to 10 years.
It is a future problem, truly.
Right.
It is.
But it's easy. I guess if we go back to the Eisenhower matrix, it's not an urgent thing right now for a lot of people. We're on our end starting to have conversations with advisors who are like, oh yeah, one of our clients passed away and like his wife inherited um, his estate and she just walked away from us because she didn't have a relationship. Or same thing, we had a conversation this week with another advisor who the parents passed away and the kids took the assets and just walked out the door. And they've been working with this family for well over a decade, but they hadn't developed a relationship with the kids.
Yeah.
And so, this wealth transfer is going to happen. It's going to impact business for better or for worse.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you've done a really great job at illustrating the importance of that. So if you were to articulate kind of what's at stake right now, what would you say?
What's at stake for advisors? Again, back to I think I said this at the very beginning, the advisors who have done the great work of building practices built on serving clients, meeting clients where they're at, helping them get from where they are to where they want to be. There's a continuation coming of that. And it's maybe different problems or different opportunities. Again, just however you want to slice that. And it's going to require some of us to learn more, to move toward information that wasn't presented to us in our CFP. And we're going to have to embrace that as great advisors who want to continue to do work. I think for the right advisors and the ones that I have in mind, it's not just a money grab. It's not trying to get more assets. It's not trying to hold on to and cling tight to the assets that they've worked so hard to build. It's just about like, I'm in this industry to serve people well. That's what has compensated me well, is to serve people well. And so moving forward, in order to continue on that mission and to hold that in mind, I'm going to have to learn some new tools. I'm going to have to take on some different information and make space for new ways to serve people. And this is part of that. And so as I quote him all the time, I love that he said this to me. I'll never forget it. Carl Richards talked about one time, like taking that long walk in the woods. And he and I were preparing for a conversation with advisors kind of similar to this. And he had this, lit checklist. He was like, I could just hand them the checklist. But that wouldn't do any good for them if they haven't taken that long walk in the woods to figure out what matters to them. What's at stake for their practice? Why do they need to implement some of these things? What really matters is only going to occur to them after they've sat with this. And so that's really my challenge to the folks who are listening here. And what I think is at stake here, the mission in front of us is we have these clients that need good advice. Those clients are changing, growing, aging. These assets are shifting to a new generation. They have different needs. What's at stake is if we aren't willing to continue with this good mission of helping them, other people who are less interested in helping and more interested in the money grab are going to be there.
Yeah.
And so we have the opportunity and really the directive to take on what we can and what's in our lane and learn what we need to learn in order to be able to continue to help into these future generations and continue to, raise the tide here in the financial services industry of being a high level service and support to the people and their financial needs. So that's what's at stake for me.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for bringing so much thoughtfulness and preparation and some great experience, and more than anything for me, the practical application of all this, like understanding the concepts and understanding that this change is coming is one thing, but getting some really practical tips of how to prepare, things that we can start doing to learn to serve this generation, the most wealthy generation in the history of the world. Their goals are no longer so much about generating more wealth. Their focus has shifted a lot to how do I transfer this wealth successfully?
Yeah.
And being able to adapt with the needs of that generation and then learn to serve this next generation. Like, I think you just did a great job articulating that problem is here and what are the steps that we need to take to start preparing.
Yeah. Well, thank you. This has been wonderful. Thanks so much for the invitation to talk on this.
If people want to connect with you, what's the best place for them to go?
I'm on Twitter, Lady Boss, Lady2_ Boss, and also on LinkedIn as Jess Boss on there. And
cool.
So you
I'll
can
link
find me
to
in both
both
of those places. Thank you.
so they can find you.
Awesome.
Well, thanks again.
Thank you so much, Nate.